Hi, everybody. I'm actually going to start this again because the button wasn't working properly. Me and technology. Anyway, hello to everybody who's here today. I'm really happy to see you. I've got my friend Taryn who's going to be coming on today. She's a colleague and someone I've known for a really long time. We're going to have a lot of fun. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and what emotional intelligence is. We can sort of go to that spiritual guru place about what emotional intelligence means, but we're not necessarily clear on what that means. And we want to make this really simple. Hi, Taryn. She's going to be joining us in a minute. So hang on a minute. I'm going to say hello and we're going to add her in here. Go live with Taryn. There we go. Anyway, so emotional intelligence, what is it? And why is it even important? And it's one of those words that people have just started bandying about lately. And, in the last few years, it's not necessarily. Hi, Taryn.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm just going to tell them a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, because this is going to be really fun. So emotional intelligence, we've just been talking about it a lot, actually, because before Christmas, Taryn and I and another colleague of ours, we started a wisdom book club. Hi, Frankie. And we started this, we started with the Brené Brown book called Rising Strong. Well, that was certainly an incredible pathway to what emotional intelligence is and what it takes. So for me, in a simplified version, and some of these words I don't really like consciousness and stuff like that, but it's really about, emotional intelligence is really about understanding yourself really, really well. And the truth is super simple. So that's kind of the easy part to say. The difficult part is finding actually out what it is. The other part that I really like to tell people about emotional intelligence is, when you sort of try to understand the concept, is it's what Einstein said, is that every problem needs to be resolved 6 layers below where it actually presents itself. So, everybody laughs about the typical toothpaste argument with your partner or something like that, and it's not really about that at all. So I think emotional intelligence is really about understanding yourself really well, having the skills and the tools to moderate yourself. The second part is being responsible. So responsible in terms of being able to present that in a really healthy way, which honors your needs, your values, your principles, and what's important. And really, any issues that any of us really have are around, we're needs-based human beings. So it's being able to express all that. So Taryn and I today are going to talk about, oh my goodness, all sorts of stuff in terms of the importance of this. Because at the end of the day, emotional intelligence, and I love this quote, I'm hoping I get it right, 85% of our levels of happiness and contentment and meaning in life can be directly scientifically attributed to our emotional intelligence and our ability to communicate. Communication is huge in the whole process of emotional emotional intelligence. So Taryn and I went through quite a lot with this book because the language is different. I love Brené Brown; she's amazing, and it certainly taught me a whole nother language around what it was, and also it really highlighted the process of what that really means. So for me, emotional intelligence is being able to give myself some space to think and really figure out what's going on. So instead of being reactive, we all know how being reactive can harm relationships, and whether it's personally or professionally. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And Taryn is a very heart-centered, wonderful friend who always has wonderful things to say, and I just love her dearly. And so she's here to help us understand what emotional intelligence is and how it plays out in our life, and the benefits if we actually can use some of the skills and understand what it means. It can really change our life. And of course, for me, this is all about community and connection and wanting to help people. We can only sort of manage our own little area. I'm not, a big speaker out there in the world or doing anything like that, or a guru in any way. However, I do feel that there's examples out in the world of this sort of collective unconsciousness that's going on, that if we sort of learn to manage our own little space and become more emotionally intelligent and manage our relationships differently, then that does change the world one conversation at a time. And that's kind of my mantra, is changing the world one conversation at a time. So welcome, Taryn. Yay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Oh,
Looking
thank you.
forward to this.
Yeah, it's really fun, isn't it? Hi, Colleen. It's nice to see you on here. I love it when friends that I haven't always seen, I don't get to see all that often. Obviously, it's COVID too, but it's nice to see you on here. So, Taryn, I know we talk about this a lot, especially when we went through the Brené Brown book. But what's sort of your understanding of emotional intelligence and the importance of it? And then we can talk about and help people understand the tools and the skills that it takes to actually have that, if you know what I mean.
Yes. So for me, emotionally intelligence has to do with not, we're all born these beautiful, precious little babies, and we have experiences in life where we get hurt or we get acknowledged, or we just have all the experiences of life, and all these emotions come up, and we create these personas based on how we're treated in our family, at school, positive, negative, whatever, and we make up stories. So
Mm-hmm.
we're all a bunch of walking stories,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it's factual, it's grounded, and some of it's not. A lot of it's not. And then we grow up in cultures. You take it past the individual and you grow up in a culture. For me, I'm from a Cajun culture in South Louisiana, and I was raised Catholic. Well, I have a certain way of being based on that. And a lot of times we create these personas and these beliefs about ourselves based on a culture. It's not as much individual as we think. And then we beat ourselves up like, oh my gosh, I'm so this, I'm so that, based on the culture. And we make it personal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think what the intelligence comes in when you're able to identify what your beliefs are, where they come from, are they actually grounded or not? Are they working for you or not? And identifying, it takes so much maturity to admit when you're wrong, or even about the good stuff, to be willing to be a mature adult. You have to have emotional intelligence, because the more you understand yourself, the
Mm-hmm.
more you're able and honest with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
um, then the more you're able to see other people. Um,
And embrace the differences as well. It's
right.
interesting because that really keeps coming up time and time and again. And that's kind of all of, I think a lot of it's our roadblock is that we have a thinking, we think something and it's kind of under the surface. Like I was reading a wonderful blog post today from Pam Grout, who's a wonderful scientist about, how the brain works and the heart works and how it all goes together. And it really is that some of those things are really unconscious. And I think so it's learning to give yourself the space, I think, a lot of the time to go, well, wait a minute. Is that a true thought? Is that real? And being able to monitor yourself. So, I mean, that, is harder to do. I think that does take a lot of practice and learning to go, okay, wait a minute. I'm feeling triggered. Okay, I recognize I'm triggered. I'm obviously upset. I want to lash out. I'm pissed off, whatever. And of course, being pissed off and angry is a secondary emotion. It's not a real emotion. So all of the other stuff is what's underneath the surface, as Einstein said. And so it's uncovering that and not believing your automatic thinking. Is that kind of what you were meaning, is that you can't always believe the assumption that you're making up in your head? Is that kind of what you meant?
Absolutely. Like, we're all triggered all the time. I think Debbie Ford talks about the emotional electricity, like outlet that's open. Like, maybe for you it's I'm stupid, and that was wide open. So you're looking for evidence that you're stupid all over the planet, or but a huge one, I think the umbrella of all of our negative beliefs is that we're not good enough. And that's a cultural learning. Not every culture has not good enough. Did you know that?
Don't
It's like,
that.
yeah, in other cultures, it's not all over the world that people are so, trained to feel they're not good enough. So,
I just
yeah,
kind of a universal thing, but it's not.
it is not. I can't name the cultures, but I've read that many times. So,
Know that.
anyway, I forgot where we were going with that, but
No, that's okay. So, I mean, we all have, I call them core tapes and things like that. So we all have like, and interestingly enough, when, obviously going to school and doing a lot of work and doing, Taryn and I met on a Debbie Ford personal growth program. And, there's lots of things that you learn in that and things that come out of that. And I think the main piece is that we all have sort of like this, what you're saying is that core tape. And it kind of drives a lot of stuff. And I've learned that even more when reading the Brené Brown book, how much there is like a main driver. And for how we respond or react. And so I think when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's kind of like, okay, well, what is it that isn't working? Well, obviously conflict doesn't work, arguing doesn't work, divorce sucks, not getting along with people, and all of that kind of stuff is really not a meaningful and fulfilling way to live. When we can change our emotional intelligence and bring in different skills and tools to do those pieces differently, then really our lives can change in big and great ways, I think. And it does create more intimacy and more connection. I mean, that's just a scientific fact. The more you communicate, the more vulnerable you are, the more authentic you are. You're going to be happier. Everyone around you, you're going to get along better. It's going to make the world a way different place for yourself and in big ways, as I like to dream on.
we can't forget to bring up the big word of mood, because in order to have the deep conversations, to be okay with looking at yourself and looking at ways in which maybe you've made mistakes, you have to be in the right mood. And we are never taught to, unless you go out and seek it, to manage your mood. And moods are like the big umbrella. You have feelings all the time, but some people, are in resignation a lot. They're not willing. They see no possibilities. Or their depression has to do with not seeing a lot of possibilities. So in order to be ambitious and enthusiastic, you have to be open and look for the possibilities and think there are possibilities. So a lot of resignation, depression, resentment, just bad moods, really about not seeing any possibilities and living in the past and believing that nothing will change.
Yeah. And our brains get wired in that place too. So it's harder to get out of that. And so I love what you're saying too, because we have to live in hope in some way. I mean, nothing in the world is done without hope. And when you think about it, we do everything with a hope. I cook dinner, so I hope that I can feed myself. I mean, like hope is a really important, it's an important driver. And of course, there's loads of things that hinder the potential or seeing the possibilities or having hope of change. And yet if we do hear that, okay, there is a way to do this differently, and that's what I wanted to do today, was to try to help people understand that it's not some big lofty difficult thing to do. It is difficult, don't get me wrong, but
it's not stuck in you like a liver. Like, I'm lazy. That does not live in me like a liver. Like, what I'm saying? Like, we can change. We can change our behavior, change our mood, and then we're able to change our life.
Yeah, and I think that comes with understanding. So maybe that's that first piece about emotional intelligence is understanding. So because the word consciousness just sounds like some guru word that really bothers me for some reason today. I don't know why, but it really is about, okay, it's recognizing, and this is the hard part. Okay, I am triggered. Now I need to process it. So the book that we discussed, and get to the truth. So that I can do something differently. So those skills are really important. Is giving yourself permission to take time to process and go, okay, well, wait a minute. This, I can feel it. It's kind of like anxiety.
The rumble.
Yeah, the rumble.
Tell them a little bit about the.
It's a great word. Brené Brown calls it the rumble. So, it was different languaging, and
the book was Rising Strong. So in order to rise strong, first you rumble.
Yeah, first you have to.
Like, ooh, I'm triggered here. What's going on?
Triggered.
Let me take a look at this.
Exactly. And that can be the hard part. Sometimes she always recommends that you write out what is it she called? A shitty first draft? Excuse the
Yeah.
language. Guys
Yeah.
who they were out there like that. But she calls it the shitty first draft. It is in the book. So, you know, I'm being legit. Um, so is you write out your first drafts and then you actually really try to process it a little bit better to understand. Now, my thing being a communication, you know, I call myself a communication specialist, although I've been told that I still have work to do, as we all do.
We're all human. We
We,
all have a
we
lot of
all do,
work.
yeah, we do.
And yet we don't.
And yes, we don't. But it is basically that you want to work with all of this stuff. You want to try to unearth the truth. So the first part is, okay, I'm in this situation. I'm feeling really triggered. I'm processing it. What is it that I'm not getting? What is it that I need? Because we all have needs. There's all our 9 basic ones, and then there's a million other ones, you know, and I have really useless needs as well, including that I need beauty in my life. I mean, I'm just using that as an example, but so identifying our needs for respect or, you know, appreciation or understanding or any of those things kind of are what underneath feeling sad or hurt, you know, and those are the feelings that are underneath, you know, the more vulnerable feelings. And of course, Brené Brown is like a total guru when it comes to vulnerability. I mean, I think she was one of the very first people that really talked about how important vulnerability is. And we need to be vulnerable with ourselves to be able to look at the truth. I would think that you might agree with that, Taryn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and then it's kind of like, well, okay, so now I'm going to figure out. Now, how do you figure it out, Taryn? Like, what's your process of getting to the truth for you? When it's difficult or you're feeling upset or triggered or whatever, what do you do?
Well, I get quiet.
Mm.
I get quiet and I look at what am I feeling? What are my thoughts about it? Do I need to repair anything or say anything or ask for anything? What action do I need to take?
Well, that's kind of getting towards the end of the process, though, isn't it? Because so when I'm saying, like, how do you get to the understanding of that piece where you go from the reactivity to, oh, wait a minute, I was making an assumption about this. I thought this meant this about me. I was taking it personally. That's not what it is. To get to the piece where you understand what it is you really need out of the situation. Like that piece, that's the really difficult piece, I think.
I think I just ponder. I sit and ponder, you know, or write.
Get it.
It
Yeah.
helps a lot to write in a journal, you know, all the thoughts so that I can see it all on paper and kind of come to that, you know.
Sometimes I go to my therapist.
What?
Sometimes I have to go to my therapist.
I call my friend.
I was going to say, I call my really good friend Taryn, or you know, my really good friend here. Yeah, my personal growth buddies. Those are my personal growth buddies, and it's really important to have those people in your life. Okay, so then we get to the part where, okay, we've identified that we need something, and then we need to figure out how to express it to somebody, right? And tell them what's happened for us from that authentic place. So what was the part, I forget what Brené Brown called that part. Well, that's kind of anyway, she has words, reckoning, rumble. Anyway, I still get stuck in the rumble and then try to.
Oh, yes. The reckoning.
Yeah.
It's the rumble, then you reckon with it. Like, what do I do next?
Right. And what do you do next? So if you're learning emotional intelligence skills, then that's where you feel really clear, you're calm. Because at this point, being emotional intelligence, I think would suggest that we don't do anything when we're not feeling calm. But we have something we need to talk to somebody about. And some people can handle these conversations, right, Taryn, and other people can't. Right? We have to
and I really think you can learn these things. That I think that some people think, oh, you're just naturally a, you know, vulnerable person. Well, not necessarily. You can really learn. All this is human beings can learn. It just takes a lot of courage and vulnerability and willingness. I think maturity is the word I use. Just a willingness to say, you know what, I don't know what to do here. And that has a lot to do with ego. You know, sometimes there are a lot of women in the personal growth field. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
And not men. Not to put down there. I'm just making a joke about how open women tend to be, and maybe less ego, and that's cultural as well. Sometimes I have a lot of effect, appreciation for how hard it must be for men to have to hide their feelings when we're able to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, express them. And believe me, both sides have their things. We all know what they are, that we are cultured to be a certain way. So again, I say that because it's hard not, it's important not to beat yourself up about who you are, because it's not just you individually that we're taught to believe. It's a cultural thing as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand.
The way that we handle emotions and
Mm.
our intelligence about it, and the willingness to do something different.
Yeah, I actually see, my children's generation raising their children. So my children's children, my grandchildren, um, really learning more an emotional, intelligent way to communicate than we did. Certainly than I did when I was younger. We weren't taught how to really do that and understand what our feelings were. And they can be, for a lot of us, very overwhelming. And it does depend on so many things: our upbringing, our families, socialization, culturally, all of the trauma. These all things affect our ability to be able um, to tap into that authentic intelligence below, where we really know what we need and want and what our principles are, and where we need to set boundaries. So, and of course, that's sort of at the end, down the line, or those are parts of communication and things that we all need to learn how to do, is to set boundaries, for things that are important to us. And that is difficult to do because we have to be really clear about what those are. So, and I still carry on learning, but I love it when one of my youngest sons, he'll, I might be a little bit stroppy about something, and when we used to live together, we don't anymore. And he'd go, "Mom, what do you need right now?" And it'd be, "Oh my God, I've got the permission, I've got that relationship with him, that he understands that language." And sometimes, it takes a while to process, and then we would talk about it. And we have some very deep conversations about things like this, in terms of getting to the root of it. Again, it's like an issue you're having with your partner, with your friend. You've been hurt, you're feeling sad, you're rumbling around with some feelings that you're really not sure about. It's figuring out what you need in that, what you need to express to that person, because the expression of that in a really healthy way is going to create more intimacy. It's going to create better friendships. It's going to create, better colleagues and everything. I just think it's amplified that if we can learn how to do that. So when we've kind of figured out that piece, so, you kind of go from the rumbling and the reactivity, and then you kind of figure out what it is you need, what it is you need to express. Is how do we do that? Expressing that in a moment takes being able to sit down, try, you're calm, and then move into the conversation. So the conversations are really important. And Brené Brown, she did describe those quite well. Again, the languaging was a little bit different. But how would you describe a conversation that you have found a really positive one that's worked well, when you come back with, you figured it out, you're calm, and you need to tell somebody something? How do you manage that?
I would hope that I tell the truth. Like, look, I did this. I'm really sorry about it. Or, this is the story I'm making up.
Mm-hmm. And that's if it's an apology. But what if it's something you need from the other person? If you're feeling hurt by a
Right.
partner or a friend or a family member or something, and you've had to really go, what are my feelings going on here? How has it affected me? Because of course we all need to take responsibility, and we all need to sometimes make apologies and all of that. But I'm talking about the hard part of emotional intelligence, I think, is the vulnerable part, which is then expressing what it is we need and want. And a lot of us don't feel we have permission to do that. We don't give ourselves permission. Sometimes society says, shut up, don't say anything about that. Don't rock the boat. I mean, those are all tapes that go on. So in that kind of scenario, what would you suggest to our lovely people here?
Well, I would again tell the truth, always the truth, which is, this is how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
When, you can do the, the typical, I feel blank when you did blank. And at the same time, it's really important that you are in touch with your feelings, that you're being responsible. You're saying, I was hurt when you said this. And I would typically, based on the reckoning and the rumble, I would say the story I made up was blank.
Right.
And I usually brace myself because people can tend to be very defensive when you're telling them what your story is. Because, like, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? I'm not saying that's what you did. And then when you're feeling so vulnerable saying that, it's like, oh my God, you mean that? Why should Oh, it can be a total, blank show. But, as long as you stay and be responsible for yourself and be accountable for your own experience,
Mm-hmm.
um, I that and I have to say this right now because if I don't say it, I'll forget. We are all doing the best we can.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm thinking about myself, but it's really important to remember that people are doing the best they can. And Brene Brown actually did research on that and was really, really not happy when her therapist told her that people were doing the best they can.
Yes, I
So,
remember that chapter. I had to rumble
yeah.
with that chapter and go, well, are people really doing the best they can?
Well, again, and then this is the ego coming in, the I want to be right. Would you rather be right than happy? I love that term. It's like people just want to be right, and then that gets in the way of the real rising strong. Because if you always have to be right and make the other person wrong because they didn't understand that you were hurt and they got defensive when you said this is how I feel,
Mm-hmm.
so in order to stay grounded, you stay with your own experience and tell the truth.
Right.
I
Without,
feel this way when you said that. I feel hurt and this is what I need. Next time, could you not roll your eyes when I look at you
mm-hmm.
and tell you how I feel? Because that I feel invalidated and it makes me not want to speak to you and to talk to you or trust you because I feel like you invalidate me. And I want a relationship where we are connected and intimate and respect each other, even though we're different. Uh,
Exactly.
just because you don't feel the same way I do when I roll my eyes doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. That's another thing. Is it right or wrong? Or is it, if it doesn't work, don't do it. It's not about right and wrong. If we could just put down that right hammer and stop,
Yeah.
raising the, oh, I'm right, or I'm right, the right
Yeah.
flag, and,
Well,
and just be in a space of open to what works and what doesn't work, not just what's right and wrong.
exactly. Because at the end of the day, um, if we make somebody wrong, we're making ourselves right, then we're making somebody else wrong. And that's not going to create any connection. That's not going to create good feelings amongst anybody. When you were talking and describing that, there's one thing. So last week I had to express something that was really important to me to one of my young men. And what I led with, and it actually worked really well, was an intention. I actually, so, I've studied NVC, nonviolent communication, and, I'm an attachment therapist and all that kind of stuff. So I always want to lead with trying to create more connection and attachment with the people that I love. But I found that if I lead with an intention and no judgment, blame, or criticism, but the intention of describing right at the beginning, even what it is I need from somebody, is I just need to express something so that you understand me better. I'm not wanting to criticize or blame anybody for anything. You're not doing anything wrong. And I always go, it's not about wrong and right, but I need to tell you something so you understand me. And I use that, my own sort of strategy, because that's what I, teach people to do. But I used it and it worked really, really well. And I think by the end of the conversation I had with this particular young man of mine, I think that he had a better understanding of who I was as a person. And some of it was a little hard to admit, but I needed him to understand this piece because of this communication thing we were having going on. So I think getting really clear at the beginning of what's your hope? We'll go back to the word hope or the possibility. What is your hope by expressing these things that you need with this person that you want to talk to them about? Being really clear about that in your own head, and then even expressing a little bit about that, or saying, you know, I just need to explain this to you, or for whatever it is, because everyone's different. And then for me, I really love the piece where you tell the person what's happened, but there's no judgment, literally no criticism. There's no blame. It's just like a fact. And then you tell them about how you felt about that. And it's a great sort of formula, you know, it's to really get those feelings out. You tell somebody what you're feeling, how it affected you and impacted you. And then you can tell them what you need, your values and your principles, and then what it is that you want to do differently, like what you just said, which was brilliant, is I'm hoping that we can have conversations where we don't roll our eyeballs. And just so everybody knows, that's very contemptuous behavior. If you want to ruin a relationship, roll your eyeballs at somebody. It completely invalidates their experience, who they are as a person. It's like one of those things that's just not on. It's Dr. John Gottman, I think, says that it's contemptuous behavior. If you roll eyeballs, there's going to be that's going to be one of those clues that your relationship isn't going to last. And when I first started, I went, wow, my husband rolls his eyeballs at me.
Yeah. And what is their intention in doing that? So I wanted to add, when you use the word hope, I tend to use the word intention before any conversation that's tough for me. I say, what is my intention here? It certainly isn't to be right when I'm coming from a really honest, vulnerable position. Because the truth is, bottom line, we all just want to be loved and heard and accepted and be in relationships that we love, and we're free to love and be free to mess up. And there's nothing more beautiful to be in the presence of someone who is so loving and accepting that you don't feel so ashamed of who you are if you mess up. It's like, what a gift that we all can be for each other. And it, it's about managing your own fears, because in my book, there's love and there's fear. And most of our negative, stuff that gets in the way of our beautiful expressions is all about fear, not being in a space of love and openness and acceptance for whatever reason.
I know.
But it's important to look at that for that reason.
Well, exactly. And I think with a lot of, what we're describing in terms of communication, it's also learning to trust the people that we're going to be vulnerable with, and creating and knowing that we're safe with them. I mean, I think a lot of us, I know for myself, a lot of us have grown up in families which aren't really emotionally safe. And so there could be that lingering feeling of insecurity and safety in terms of being vulnerable or sharing our what we really need. And I'm really guilty of that. Like, I mean, sharing, with family what I need sometimes can be really challenging for me. And but my boys are great. They always really push me to learn more, to do better, to ask for what I need and what I want. And it's a true blessing. And I'm learning to trust that they do understand. They do, respect that, and that they kind of are there for me, whether they agree or not, because it's not about right and wrong. And I'm just loving that we brought that up. That was really important. And the other thing that you're saying, Taryn, which I really think is, it is, universally known, I think most people do, is that fear and love can't coexist. And of course, for me, love is about trust. And I daily remind myself that I have to remind myself to trust or have faith that I can do this, that the people I love, are there for me. And there's those daily reminders. But love and fear are not two things that kind of, there's lots of good stories about that. And that ties into emotional intelligence as well, in terms of what it is you can allow yourself to process. trusting yourself, that you're going to get to a place where, oh yeah, that's what that's about. I actually felt really hurt. I wasn't angry. I was feeling really let down or hurt or sad. And those are the vulnerable feelings that are harder, I think, as humans to acknowledge. But I think that's kind of the first step, isn't it? And then the peace, which is one of my biggest values. And it's, I think sometimes the things that we, that we feel strongly about can also be a weakness. But I really, really have a strong value for responsibility, and people taking responsibility and not just dumping all their stuff all over me. And I'm not going to accept it, and I'm not going to take it on. And unfortunately, I am the queen of questions because I'm very curious. And that's one of the good qualities about that we need to be good communicators too, is being curious, right? About other people and what their experience is and why and all of that. In fact, there's some really important principles to stand on when it comes to good communication, and curiosity is one of them. Being curious, asking good questions, and not why or sounding judgmental, but being really curious about someone's experience. Having courage, those are things that are important. Commitment to stay in the difficult place until you reach an understanding. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about all those sorts of things? What skills would you say are important that we really need to really work on, actually? I mean, some people don't really know what being curious is or what it takes to be courageous or to have consciousness. Like, what is it that you think are important? Some of the main ones for being emotionally intelligent, as we're calling it today.
Well, I think what we said earlier about just when you're triggered, that is like the gift. When you're really angry or you're really sad, if you want to create a life that's authentic and full of love, and you have to rumble and reckon with all the yuck. I mean, it takes courage, it takes vulnerability, it takes not being right, it takes being loving, and not being committed. Really, it's a journey. It's not for the lighthearted. And I wanted to make a point about trust and how, it's important to be prudent about who you share who you do get vulnerable with. And that's definitely a part of emotional intelligence that's extremely important. And that's a whole other day conversation about trust with.
Great point. Like, I mean, honestly, and I called it my lifelong lesson from, being, I mean, not gullible, but naive maybe. I mean, I think when I was younger, I was very naive. And so I have learned the art of discernment. So, and I joke about it because it really is an important quality and it is a skill. Discerning people that are safe, that you can trust, that those are the people you want to spend your time with, create connections, strong connections with. And so I love that you brought that up. That is a really, really good point. Thank you.
So I teach a teen empowerment program in schools, and one of the elements that I really drive home to them about trust is, well, there are 3 elements of trust, and one is competence. Or are you going to trust somebody to, pull your tooth if they didn't go to dental school? Or is that person reliable? Do they show up on time? Are they going to be available when they say they are? Or competence, insincerity, or maybe somebody's sincere, they really want to pull your tooth, and they can, they say, look, I went on the internet, I know just how to pull your tooth, I figured it out. I mean, this is for teenagers, so they laugh and we have a good time talking about it, but it's really, are they reliable, are they competent, and are they sincere? If you have those 3 elements, that's a big chunk of trust too.
So those are sort of like the things you need to actually be able to do to be able to figure out if somebody's trustworthy or not. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Part of it. I'm sure there's more, but there are really 3 elements that I tend to, how I present it to the kids about trust.
I bet that's really fun teaching them, from that kind of place. Teens are great. They kind of soak up all this kind of stuff when it comes to learning new skills and tools and being open to, how do we do these things differently? That's why it's so brilliant that I think that when we teach emotional intelligence to younger kids and give them the language around feelings, I mean, I can sometimes ask clients, um, how they're feeling about something, and they can't describe a feeling. And that's the piece where I know my body is like a complete barometer for my feelings. I can feel it, in my throat, or I can feel it in my chest or in my stomach. And we we're human beings. We're made up of like a million different feelings, and those are our gifts. Being able to be a feeling, a feeling human, and use those feelings in terms of what it means for us, and how the information that's there. I mean, it's great information in our feelings. It doesn't mean we have to act on feelings in any negative way, but we take them and go, okay, wait a minute. That's a feeling. I'm feeling hurt, or I'm feeling sad, and what needs to happen from that place. So I'm really, this is really a good conversation. If you got anything else about your teams you could share that would be really valuable for us, because you teach this stuff.
I was going to say something we were just talking about moods and emotions.
Oh yeah.
How the moods can make or break your day, your world, your life. If
Mm.
you're chronically in a bad mood, and we know somebody listening knows somebody who's chronically in a bad mood.
They're negative. They have negative thinking, and
They're depressed even. And it's really it can open possibilities and close possibilities, because like the right conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation. It's good, because a lot of times when we go to have a conversation like we were just talking about, to share our most vulnerable experience, when somebody just got home and kicked the dog, that's not a good time. And those kids know exactly when to have the right conversation with their parents. They know by the way their parents open the door at night coming home from work, whether they're in a mood to have a conversation or not. It's amazing. We all are like that, but especially family members know each other really well and can really
that's really
pick up on
important.
that.
It's recognizing. I have a member in my family who calls it strategic communication, and it's like
Emotional intelligence.
emotional intelligence, strategic communication. I love that comment, because it is true. It's like there is a good time to have the conversation, and it's when you're calm, and it's when the other person is calm and receptive, and it's not when somebody's upset. So those are not the times to dive into your emotional intelligence and think somebody's screaming and yelling over here. This is the time to give yourself space. Now, between couples, this is a really important point. I just want to tell you this. It's a really good point. Men have a much bigger physiological response to stress. And stress can sound like, honey, I need to have a conversation with you, from their partner. But because they have a bigger physiological response, men need more time to process things. Women need to learn that it's not a good time, even though their anxiety says maybe my relationship is stressed. That creates a feeling of unsafeness for that person, that partner. And it doesn't matter who it is. It's just one or the other is going to experience that. So both people in conversations like that really need to take the time to let one partner who needs to go and, process something, and have the time and trust that they're going to come back. And then the other person needs to manage their anxiety. So I think in conversations where there's couples involved, doesn't matter what kind of couples, any couple, it really is important. What Taryn has said is to recognize the person's ability to have that conversation and when that's going to be the right time to do it. Sadly for women, I remember doing this when I was married, when I was like 20 years old, and I really hated it when there was conflict. I still don't like it when there's conflict, or I'm feeling upset, or my partner's upset or something. I want to resolve it right now so everything can go back to feeling okay. However, that's not really the emotionally intelligent way to handle it. The best way, I think, is to give everybody space. And my lesson in that, being, back in my 20s, was that you really have to manage your own anxiety around that, because it does cause a lot of anxiety for women. It's primitive It's tribal to want to maintain safety and security. It goes, way back to that feminine energy, and being a nurturer, and having families and your own safety, because you needed your partner to look after you back then, not now, but we do in other ways, emotional ways. We need to look after our partners, and that's one of the ways we can do it, is giving men the space to process it. When they literally, their blood pressure goes up, they get flooded. Women don't get flooded in quite the same way, but women's anxiety goes up. So you end up in conversations at the beginning where there's conflict and upset, trying to deal with that piece. And I think that's an important piece. A lot of my clients find that part really hard to understand as a couple. They want to deal with it now, and yet sometimes you can't. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Taryn. That's a really good point, is that you have to pick the appropriate time. You also have to recognize that men and women, male and female energy, deal with these things quite differently. And again, it goes to, I don't know, mood. It goes to, your own inner experience of what you're experiencing in that moment. So that's a very good point.
I'd like to share complete what I brought up, the mood of resignation and resentment, because you're not seeing what's possible, or I was talking about depression. So the flip side of that I present to the teens, when you asked about something else I wanted to share. There are 4 basic moods in life, and all of this is based on an ontological coaching course that I'm an ontological course, and it's really about how looking at our being and language and our biology and emotions. So it's a really great way of seeing human beings. So look, the 4 basic moods are, when you're looking at facts in life, if you oppose the facts, you have resentment. Like, water's wet and rocks are hard, and I don't like that. It's like, today I'm 57 and I don't like that, so I'm going to be resentful. I can't change that. Those are the facts. But if I accept the facts, that I'm 57 or whatever I don't like, not that I don't like that, then I'm at peace. So if you are feeling peaceful, you probably are accepting the facticity of whatever situation you're in. And when you're noticing you're so not peaceful, it's usually because there's some form of acceptance that's not been reached about the facts. And also, when you're looking at the possibilities, when you're accepting the possibilities, then you're totally enthusiastic and ambitious, excited, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So, and then when you're opposing the possibilities, then you're in resignation. So, and resentment and depression. It's not really exciting when you're not, when you don't see any possibilities, then you're therefore very, sad and bored and depressed and resentful. And, and again, I just wanted to throw those out. So it's accepting and opposing facts, and accepting and opposing possibilities. Oh,
Oh, thank you. That actually ties in, I think, to something that one of my colleagues a long time ago said. When you get yourself into a situation, ask yourself these 3 questions. I think they kind of tie in a little bit. What am I judging? What am I resisting? And what am I attached to? So when I'm struggling with something, I can sort of use what you're saying. I think is really important, is ask myself those 3 questions. What am I resisting? What am I attached to? And what am I judging? And when I can kind of ask myself those 3 questions, it really helps kind of shake out some of what you're talking about, are some of those beliefs in there. Am I going this way or am I going that way? But those are great. So that's kind of like a quadrant that you're describing. Mm-hmm. Love to see, there must be a diagram of that. I'd love to see that. I can post it on, I'll post it on Instagram after that. That'd be great. Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's good. So what I'd really like to do is, I can see there's lots of people on here, and I was wondering if anybody has any questions, because we're sitting here, we've got a little bit more time, just a few more minutes before we have to turn this off. But I'm wondering if anybody has any questions about emotional intelligence. I mean, we can't cover everything today, But I think that we wanted to try to cover the basics, which is it's all about awareness. It's about taking responsibility. It's about then figuring out what you need and want, and then it's expressing that to the people that we know that we want to talk about those things with. And also managing, as I said at the beginning, managing reactivity. I mean, that was a really good point that we brought up, is that we really do have to recognize that part of being emotionally intelligent is giving ourselves space, permission, time to work it out so that we really know what we need to express. But I think if we do that, our lives can change in really quite large ways. So I don't see any questions coming up, and I'm sure you don't want to keep listening to me, but why is so important to me is I know that most of my life I've really struggled to feel understood. Whether that's true or not is another thing. Thank you. That's really nice. She says you covered a lot of great stuff. Thank you. Well, you're more than welcome. We're going to have probably way more conversation about these things. But it's true. So I learned early on, I thought, okay, I've got to take responsibility. If people aren't understanding me, somehow I'm not expressing it well. And that's when I started on the journey to try to figure out how do you communicate these things and in a really authentic, heart-centered way. And that's what I love about you, Taryn, is because when Taryn talks, when we're doing our book club or we're just talking because she's such a good friend or helping me through stuff or vice versa, you come from a very heart-centered place. And I think that for me, if we're going to talk about what is emotional intelligence, it's really speaking from the heart. And that's, I'm touching where my heart is, but speaking from the heart in terms of the truth. And I'll always go back to my quote, which is that the truth is actually quite simple. And we just cover it up with layers of our thinking, with our programming, with our wounds and our damages. And if we can clear that stuff away and just get to the heart of it, to the truth of it, then really we can change so much about our lives, our relationships, work, and in bigger ways. And we've seen so many examples out there in the world today where communication is breaking down. People are not getting their needs met. They're going to that more primitive place of violence to resolve things. And we all know that, NVC is non-violent communication. And it's how our words are words. And Taryn is a word. I think that's what, you said, the ontological part is about words and how important they are and how we use them and say them. And I think that the world needs more of that. So I'm going to encourage all of you guys to learn more about yourself and come from that heart place and keep up the conversations and be able to learn to express how you do things differently so that you can have and feel happier. Life is more meaningful. You feel more love in the world and more love with your friends and your family. And so I'm going to encourage you all that's where I hope that we can go with all of. We're just here to just try to help you and support you. Taryn, what else would you like to say just as we're going to be wrapping up here, my love?
Just thank you so much. I have enjoyed this conversation. I hope whoever's listening has enjoyed it too. Thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. There's a lot more to talk about.
I absolutely think there's a lot more to talk about, and we can get in depth. We can actually go and just take one of the principles and talk about, well, what is curiosity, or what does that look like? Take those principles and really, we just tried to give you an overview today of what emotional intelligence looks like. But honestly, it's been great having you here. If you have questions, please come find me. Write me a note, send me a message, whatever you want. Taryn's the same. She's on Instagram as well. I think I posted all that. So, and I'm going to post that thing that you said when you send me the quadrant. Oh, thank you. One of the most insightful women and creative women I know just says thank you to us, but always my thank you goes to you, Frankie, as well. And Taryn, thank you so much for being here. So next week will be something even more interesting. Taryn's going to be back next week, and we will be discussing kind of how personal growth and books all tie in, and how sometimes we don't get what we need out of the books, and how we are trying to facilitate people learning more by following through, having accountability, following through in our Wisdom Book Club, which is really about taking what we're learning and actually then applying it in life. I think I said that right. Was there anything else you wanted to add about that? And our colleague Liz will be there next week with us as well. So this will be the three of us on talking about how we learn. I mean, learning, you know, we take it in and we only take in 20%, but how do we apply a lot of what it is that we learn from books and, you know, people out there giving information. So that's what we'll be doing next week. So we hope you'll join us next week as well. So we're almost at the end and I don't want to lose the video. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you all go have a nice day. It's a gorgeous day in Vancouver here.
Thank you, Elena.
Yes. Take care. Oh, it was nice. Did your friend join? That was wonderful.
I
Hi, Alex.
saw a few, I think.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Love you guys. Hope to see you
Thank
next.
y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Take care.